Welcome to Inspirational Leadership. My name is Kristen Harcourt. I'm your host. I'm an executive coach and professional speaker. I create this podcast to talk to progressive CEOs, strategic HR leaders, and forward-thinking experts who are passionate about leadership development and creating positive cultures. And part of that for me, when I think of leadership development, is really helping leaders to do the inward work and show up authentically. We spend a lot of time at work, and we don't have to be one person at home and another person at work. Let's integrate both of those sides. I've been wanting to talk to today's guest forever, so I'm really happy we're finally making this happen. So I want to introduce you to Shelley Paxton. Shelley, first of all, listen to her title. She is the Chief Soul Officer. So I know this is my kind of girl. She's a speaker, author. She's a Dare to Lead facilitator. We both love Brene Brown, and she's a consultant as well. And she has a new book, so I really encourage everybody to go out and check it out. It's called SOULBBATICAL, A Corporate Rebel's Guide to Finding Your Best Life. Welcome to the show, Shelley.
Thank you, Kristen. I'm so glad we finally made this happen. I've been really excited to talk to you as well.
So Shelley, like I said, you had me at Chief Soul Officer. And it's funny because 3.5 years ago, I left corporate, started my own job. And, one of the things that I think about is I think I felt a little bit, I didn't have the permission to use some of those words, to say soul, to say heart. And to me, when we think about corporate, when we think about leaders, that is such a huge part of who we are too. We need to tap into our soul, tap into our spirit. Tell me a little bit more about that. How did you even come up with that name?
Oh man, well, it's so interesting. You said 3.5 years. I've been on this journey for 3.5 years too. So I left Harley. So let's start with the Harley thing. So the pinnacle of my, executive career was becoming Chief Marketing Officer of Harley Davidson. So I had, from the outside looking in, I had the sexiest job in the marketing world, working for this iconic brand that people tattoo on their bodies, and it all looked like wow. And for me, it was wow. And I was also going, is this all there is? Like, I am like shiny on the outside, but I feel empty on the inside. So fast forward, the universe started to the universe like whispers to you, then it shouts to you, and then it like whacks you with a 2x4. And so I had that experience where this nightmare kept waking me up again and again and again. And I realized that what I was seeing in this nightmare was actually a proxy for my soul. And my soul was neglected and malnourished, and I was completely out of touch with it. I wasn't loving it or listening to it. Yeah. And so that's a little context for when I realized that was happening. I went, you know what? It's time for me to pay attention because I don't know what's going to happen next. And the situation I'm in is unsustainable. And I'm not being true to me. Yeah. And so I started paving the way for me to leave this huge job, this iconic company. And what scared me more than just, walking away from a big title and a 6-figure salary and, all the accolades and all the things, was that nobody around me really supported what I was doing. Wow. Harley thought I was crazy. My parents thought I was crazy. My friends, my peers, my colleagues, everybody, like, there was part envy, but part like, does she know what she's doing? Has she completely lost her marbles? Yeah. And so to answer your question, I woke up one morning because I had been sitting with this idea of like, I've got to help people understand that there's gravity in this situation. This is the most important work I'm ever going to do in my life, is really understand the iconic brand of Shelley Paxton. Yeah. And invest in the possibility of my future self. And I woke up one morning and it was like clear as day. It was like on my bedside table. It's like a note from the universe. And I was like, oh, I get it. I'm becoming Chief Soul Officer of my own life. Yeah. Because if I have a title, I'll take it seriously. That's what my mentality was in that day. And now it's stuck because it's so powerful and I understand it. But in that day, it was like, oh, okay, I'm going to give myself this title and this responsibility. And I'm going to call my journey my SOULBBATICAL, because my singular mission is to nurture and nourish my soul and see where it leads me.
Mm.
So that's kind of how, and honestly, I put those on LinkedIn because look, staring at a blank page when you're sort of closing out one chapter on LinkedIn as a business person, I've been in the corporate world for 26 years at this point.
Yes.
And it's like you're closing out the Harley chapter, which feels scary. Like all the feels were coming up. I was crying and I was excited and I was scared, out of my mind.
Yeah.
And then it's like the blank page, like, what's next, Shelley? And I was like, Chief Soul Officer of SOULBBATICAL. And I just put that out there. And what was so interesting is when I put that out there, people really started to understand what I was doing a little bit more, right?
Yes.
And they got curious.
Yes.
Like, what does this mean? Where are you going? Where does it lead? And I'm like, I don't know, but I'm trusting and surrendering. And that's sort of what guided me on this journey.
Wow. Wow. And I can connect with exactly what you're saying, that a lot of times when you're taking that path and everybody else is taking the other path, it can feel really, really uncomfortable, especially when you have everybody around you questioning. What helped you get through that? Because I think this happens a lot, right? When people start to actually get to that place where they're reconnecting with that authentic self and they start to really hear their truth, it can feel really uncomfortable because they realize they were maybe living somebody else's dreams, somebody else's life. It's not actually what their soul was telling them. But again, everyone around you is like, I don't think so. They're going to kind of push for you to stay in the box, stay where you've been. So what did you do to get through that?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And you're right. It's not only a scary experience, it's a really lonely experience. And I'll get to your question in a second, but I just want to say this for everyone who's listening or watching us. It's the reason I wrote this book. Because I wish there would have been somebody who put their arm around me and said, I got you. We're going to get through this. Everything you want is on the other side. Sit in the discomfort, as our friend Brene says, right? Normalize discomfort. And I read a lot of Brene Brown in those days. So honestly, that's part of it. So that's the reason. So I want other people to feel like, oh, there's sort of a blueprint for doing this. Other people have done it and done it successfully. I will get through this. We can do hard things. So that was my mission in writing the book. And I talk a lot about the journey. I mean, the journey was terrifying because I felt alone. I felt scared. I would ask myself on a regular basis, what the F have I done? Right? I'm like, some mornings I was excited and other mornings I was like curled up in the fetal position.
Yes.
So what I did is, at the first I realized that I was addicted to busyness. And so I didn't actually sit down and go inward. It took me a few months to be able to do that.
Yes.
And when I did, I was looking for who's modeling this, who are the kind of upholders of authenticity and courage and purpose, who are people I can learn from. So I was rereading like Cheryl Strayed's Wild. I was reading everything Brene Brown. I was reading Gay Hendricks' The Big Leap. I was really just trying to I was reading Gary Zukav's Seed of the Soul.
Yes.
I was looking to others virtually to just help give me some frameworks, some things to hang on to. So because I knew it was possible, but I also knew it was one step at a time, and I couldn't see clearly where I was going or what was even going to come up of this. I certainly couldn't see to 3.5 years later where I have a business, a book, I'm having this conversation with you, I do speaking engagements. I couldn't have known that SOULBBATICAL was going to become a movement and everything that it is today. And that's the thing I would remind everybody of, is like, we can't even imagine the bigness of what's waiting for us.
Yes. Yes. I think there's so many things that are important with what you just said there. One is recognizing the messiness, right? Because I think sometimes people see, oh, one day she was doing this, the next day she was doing this. Oh, she's so brave. She's so courageous. I don't have that in me. No, we all have to go through the messiness. I was just even posting the other day around, sometimes I wake up in the morning with this global pandemic and I notice there's some anger that comes through and I just want to say, F this, when this is going to be over. And I let all the swearing come out. I let it move through me. I don't judge it. I don't shame myself, because there might be some people who might think, oh, well, she talks all about emotional intelligence. She's a coach, so she doesn't experience that. No way. We all experience the messiness.
Exactly.
Right? But
every day. We're human.
Every day. It goes like this. It's the emotions are always moving, but it's recognizing, because I think sometimes people feel like, oh, that's just me. Other people don't experience that. So thank you for very much sharing authentically and vulnerably that was part of your experience, just like everybody else's when we make this kind of leap.
And can I just comment on that? I love that you picked up, and messiness is something I talk about a lot. I wrote this book. It's messy. Yeah. It's messy. The book is messy. It's the insides, because what scares me the most, especially in this social media world, is that we compare our insides to other people's outsides.
Yes.
And we don't see the messiness. So it was really easy for people to believe that I had it all together. I had the perfect life. I had achieved everything I wanted to achieve, because they couldn't see. And at the time, I wasn't sharing what was happening on the inside. I wasn't sharing that I was drinking a bottle of wine every night. I wasn't sharing that I was like crumbling in a heap of tears going, how can I be at the top and just feel so unfulfilled? What have I done? What have I done wrong? And then feeling guilty because I've achieved this level of success that a lot of people don't achieve. And people would give limbs to be in the job that I was in. So it was really, I feel a huge sense of responsibility. And I do this in my social feeds as well, to show my insides and to talk about what I'm going through. And I wrote the book. I mean, the book is a warts and all exploration of my journey, because that's what I want people to see and learn from.
Yes, it's true, right? We see the highlight reel, and to give everybody credit in general, like if I think about, I remember this story where my son was like 8 months old, and I left him in the high chair, and he somehow got into his diaper, and he was literally covered in poo. I'm not going to go share that on social media, right? But in that moment, I'm like, oh my God, like what is going on right now? Like, I don't want to be here right now. Like my kid is covered in poo. The other kid's calling me over there. My husband's upset and he's calling and feeling frustrated. It's so much going on, but I'm probably not going to be on social media sharing all of that kind of stuff, right? So I think that's such a good reminder. And it also makes
should you, right? Because it's part of our human experience.
Right.
That's many people would be like, oh my God, Kristen, I so connect with you. Like I just had that moment. And I feel like that's part of what's going on with this pandemic too, is like the more we can share the human moments that we're experiencing in isolation, in quarantine, the more we're connecting with each other.
So true. And I think what happens sometimes is people can be uncomfortable with others sharing the emotions because they have it in them and they're not giving themselves permission. So it was interesting, even when I shared what I was experiencing, and that it was okay, no judgment. We're allowed to feel anger. We're allowed to feel sadness. And someone went right to, I think you wouldn't feel the anger in the first place when you started to think about what's happening in the world, and started talking about a situation where, a terrible tragedy that actually happened in Nova Scotia recently, which was awful.
I think about that.
I think we're at 23 people who died, and it's awful. But it was a great example of struggling with being able to give she couldn't give herself permission that we are still allowed, even though other things like that are happening out there. That doesn't mean that we're not allowed to have our own personal experience where we are feeling sadness, anger. We don't have to make ourselves, even sometimes people are misinterpreting the positive psychology that means, well, you should have gratitude 24/7 and you should always be positive. That's not even what the positive psychology movement is trying to show. We are supposed to have the full human experience, which is all emotions. But I think others who are still kind of on their inward journey and haven't done some of that inward work feel uncomfortable when people are sharing some of that, because there's almost those are bad emotions. We're not supposed to experience anger. We're not supposed to experience sadness.
Yeah. And I love that you talk about permission, because this is one of the big things. I kind of wrote up like 8 to 10 commandments of being a chief soul officer.
Yeah.
And the number one is we don't ask for permission. We give ourselves permission.
Yes.
And I love that you say that. And in fact, I start every day, and I have all my clients do this too. In fact, I start every day with orange Post-it notes, because orange is my thing, as you know.
Yes.
And I ask the question, like, what do I need to give myself permission to do, to feel, or maybe to not do, in order to show up as my most authentic and courageous and powerful self today? It's very much a Brene thing, right? The permission slips exercise. And that is so crucial to being chief soul officer of your life. It's like, check in and give yourself that space and that grace, right?
Yes.
So that's one thing I share with everybody, that I think we can do more of that, like in the moment, like even doing that in meetings, especially now that we've got virtual meetings happening. Like, give yourself permission. Like, what do you need to just need permission to get messy in this meeting, to come to some resolution? Give yourself permission to just turn everything else off, whatever it is. Give yourself permission to take a nap. I think that's right now. We are feeling the heaviness of this situation.
Yes.
So I would love more and more people to say, you know what? Or just like, I call it napitate, right? Do a little like nap meditation by just closing my eyes and put a cover over my eyes for like 20 minutes in the afternoon, and it rejuvenates me.
And I think it's really a good reminder around what it looks like to be constantly checking in with ourselves and recognizing what our needs are. And our needs are changing and shifting throughout the day. And I love the example that you gave there in the meeting, because that's shown up with a couple of clients. And what they actually did is they shared very authentically in a meeting what was coming up for them and what they were experiencing. And guess what? Then it started to create this beautiful moment of connection where everybody else on that meeting started to share what they were experiencing. Again, goes back to now they didn't feel lonely, like they're the only one feeling like this. There was a shared experience of, we're all going through this together, but also recognizing when we're all going through the ups and downs, we're not all going through the ups and downs in the same moment. So one person could be in I feel so inspired right now. I feel creative. All of my energy is flowing. And then your spouse or your partner in that moment could be actually having a really hard moment. And so it's really meeting people where they are too, because we're all experiencing this in different ranges and different places on a minute by minute basis.
It's so true. And I just love the conversations that we're having, like the human conversations that we're having. I was the guest on a virtual book club last night. They were reading my book. And it was so much fun. We got into exactly these kinds of conversations. I'm like, we don't have to dive into all the details of the book. I wanted to use it as a way to get into like, how are people feeling right now? Because you and I talked before about this. The world is basically on sabbatical. So how are they using the time? What are the feelings that are coming up? What are the realizations that they're having? Like, what do I want more of in my life? That maybe I'm like, oh, I didn't have enough of that pre-pandemic. What do I want to create more of and actually have less of coming out of this? And so I've been like, I feel profoundly on purpose right now, because I believe that this is our moment. This is our time to slow down. The world is on pause to a degree. And I'm not talking, the frontline essential workers, like huge, huge gratitude for everything that they're doing right now and always. But for the rest of us, even if we're working from home, actively working and running our families and everything, we have a moment. I've been encouraging people to like find your soul signal in the midst of all this noise. Even if it's 15 minutes a day, just go sit in your closet. If it's the only dark and quiet room in your house, sit in a closet and just check in. be silent, sit still and listen. It's such a beautiful time for us to reconnect with that little voice. And when we're in the rat race and we're, distracted by busyness, we lose that connection. It's where I was when I was at Harley. So finding that signal will guide us through this storm and beyond.
And I think that's so important. This is an opportunity. See the gift. What's this moment here to teach you? And for some of us, it's slowing down, and your defaults, for people listening right now, your default is to do. And so even at home in the situation, you're trying to find ways to do, because it feels uncomfortable to be in the being. But the being is the magic. That's where so much learning and growth can happen. But it's about taking a step back and asking yourself some questions. And maybe it's about reprioritizing. Maybe it's about recognizing what you thought was most important is not actually what's most important. And maybe when you're noticing you're feeling anxiety or frustrated or overwhelmed, when you slow down, you can recognize that, oh, it's telling you something, but you just didn't have the time before to listen to what it was telling you because, like you said, you were so distracted in all the busyness.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so beautiful that I've been doing a lot of talking about the being versus the doing. And it is uncomfortable, right? That's why people are doing every house project under the sun right now, because it keeps us busy.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, great, do some of that, but be sure that you create that time to be. And yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. And yes, it's also going to be the most powerful and rewarding thing, because the one thing I'm super clear on is we have the agency and the opportunity to shape how we want to come out of this.
Yes, absolutely.
The more of us, right? The more of us who are doing that, you and I, like, we're big on shifting culture.
Yeah.
This is how we got connected. This is what lights us on fire. And I want more people to be connected with, like, I call it rebelling for, right? So I'm the rebel. My whole thing is about awakening the rebel within if it's not already firing. And the way I like to think about it is, get really clear on who you are, what you want, and the impact you want to have in the world. Yeah. And then start thinking about, how do I want to rebel for those things as we come out of this? And you're shaping and creating your life.
What a beautiful invitation, Shelley. And as you're even talking about that from the culture perspective, there's going to be some people who are listening to this. They might be HR leaders, maybe they're CEOs, and they're wondering, how can we start to shift and create more of this in our organizations? What's some of the advice you have for them?
Oh, I love this. This is actually more of the work I want to do in the world. And this is, I think the first book was a springboard to have exactly those conversations, because the more of us who are choosing as leaders to be the chief soul officer of our lives, and if we're choosing wholehearted and courageous leadership, as Brene would say, we are bringing that into our work. Yeah. And bringing that into our work means radical self-care and self-commitment is on the C-suite agenda.
Yes.
That's one thing that's incredibly important to me. And so we talk a lot about radical self-care, but I've kind of elevated it to this conversation of radical self-commitment, because that means I'm committed to my values. It means I'm committed to my boundaries. I'm committed to the space and time I need to rest and recover. All of those things. And it means treating my body well, right? It means sleep. It means hydration. It means eating well. It means moving, all of those things, but it's more than that. Yeah. And so I love this idea, like Mind Valley as a company, I talk about them in the book because they have this concept called morning autonomy. Yeah. And it's really interesting to think about right now, because what if we give more people the morning? We say, you know what? Meetings don't actually start until 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. We give people the morning, whether it's for family time, a passion project. You know, I'm a writer. I love to spend morning creative hours writing,
Yes.
workout time, whatever it is. What if we as leaders started to bring more of that into our workplaces?
Yeah.
And we first model it. I actually think our first responsibility is to model this for our teams and then create culture around it. My dream is that cultures begin to serve the humans instead of the humans serving the culture, which is how I feel it works today. So flipping that script. The second piece of it that I'm super passionate about is, let's talk about this time off thing. I mean, first of all, SOULBBATICAL sounds like, oh, I have to leave my job and go do these things. And the realization I had with SOULBBATICAL is actually SOULBBATICAL is a way of being. It's not about leaving your job. It's about finding yourself and determining what you want to rebel for and what you want to create in your life, and doing it and leading through it more authentically, courageously, and on purpose, right?
Yeah.
However, one thing I'm passionate about is, I feel like this time off script that feels so old in companies right now is like, well, it's a payoff for hard work.
Right.
Like, really?
Yeah.
What if it was a prerequisite for smart work and creativity and innovation? And I think we as leaders can start to think about it that way and make sure that everyone is taking time off and disconnecting so that they're refueling. Imagine the productivity and the amazing ideas that would start to come out of that kind of approach.
I mean, this kind of shift, I've been talking about humanizing the workplace for the last 6 years, and everything you're saying and you've said so eloquently to me. Of course, I hear this and I'm like, why wouldn't every company be doing this? It's so like, why wouldn't we? It's good for everyone. Everyone in that organization is going to feel a lot better. And, but I do agree with what you're saying. I think it does start with the more leaders we can have going through their own personal experience, their own personal transformation, and seeing how the world looks when everything looks like this, then they start to see, well, why wouldn't I want this for all of the people where we work? And then they can start, there's lots of good work that they are going to do, right? When they're on purpose, they're going to go create amazing things in the world, but they're going to do it so much more effectively because they're going to be able to access their creativity. They're going to be able to work better with the teams around them. They're going to challenge things in a beautiful way, like Brene with the courageous conversations, right? They're going to acknowledge and say where things are not really, where the status quo needs to be challenged, because they're going to have that permission. There's just so many beautiful ways we can take that on an individual level and make this happen in our companies.
Yeah. And let's take the responsibility for creating that in the companies we work with. That's what leadership is, right? There's another concept that I feel is really relevant to talk about right now, because a lot of what I see, especially with my clients who are in the corporate world, is that corporations are just stacking Zoom calls from 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. No breaks, everything is stacked. People aren't getting a chance to rest and recover. And I talk about a concept in my book. It's modeled after, elite athletes, pro athletes. The reason they're so good at what they do is because part of their training program involves rest and recovery.
Need recovery.
There's no way they can get to the level, right? So I talk about this idea of like rally and recovery in terms of how we build our schedules. And so I would love to see corporate America do more of this, or corporate North America, corporate, global corporate, right? Although I think we're especially bad at it in North America. I would love to see, it's like, let's do like a couple of hours and then we take a break. We've got to give ourselves, we were not designed as humans to be sitting in chairs and in front of devices for 10, 12, 14 hours at a time. Mm-hmm. So how can we start to rethink what the business day looks like, so we give people breaks for that rest, for meditation, for a walk outside, for a nap even, whatever it looks like. So that I'm super passionate about. We have got to find a way to break the mold of, my days used to start at 7 a.m. every day at Harley. So I was at the office at 6:30.
Yeah.
And I never left before, 6. Then I went home, I made dinner, and I got on all my evening calls because a portion of my team was in Asia.
Yes.
And it's like I was never giving myself those breaks, and no wonder we get burned out, right? That is the formula for burnout.
The burnout one is big. And I have to say, I really think this goes back to the modeling the behavior again, because I've had many, many conversations and I support several HR leaders that you need to model what you're saying, because I can't tell you how many times. Yes, we're all about health and wellness in an organization. Employees, make sure that you're taking care of yourself. They are at the office at 6 or 7. They are looking at their available and answering emails 24/7 on weekends, on the evenings, in the evenings. They are eating their lunch at their desk. They are, so all of these things, which again, it does end up creating a lot of burnout for them. But not only that, you're in HR, you're that leader who wants to be the guiding light that's showing you the way, showing everyone the way, the possibilities.
Yeah.
And how's that going to happen, right? And I've said to so many HR leaders, you have an opportunity to go have some really courageous conversations and hold up the mirror and say, this is what's happening in the organization. It's not acceptable to expect our people to be available 24/7. We need to implement new, and I'm very cognizant of, when we start to get so much into the rules and create a structure, it shouldn't even have to be about rules. It's a conversation and communication that's constantly going out there. Because what I really see, and I know, Shelley, you and I really believe strongly around the values piece. The organizations will spend the time to get clear on their values and their guiding principles. And how demoralizing is it when you go into work day in, day out, and those values are not lived and breathed by all the leaders you see around you?
Yeah. And values are not like, I hate when things live on plaques on walls, right? So how is it 3-dimensional? How is it lived and practiced and modeled every single day? And it does start at the top, right? It absolutely, you look at like Mark Benioff from salesforce.com, right? So it's like meditation is a big thing, mindfulness. So he has mindfulness, in meetings, is as training in the organization, meditation rooms in headquarters. Like, there is a way. It's not impossible for us to be mindful as leaders and model this and create culture around it. People are so desperate for it right now,
Yes.
especially right now. And I think this is opening a lot of people's eyes to what is possible, because I know in many of the companies I worked in, they were really hesitant to embrace any sort of remote working situation. It was like,
Yes.
nope, it all happens here. It happens in the building. And I'm like, how true is that? And now we're proving that it's not true. And that this new reality, I think, is going to shift more and more of the workforce to flexible work hours, to flexible remote time
Yes.
and time. Maybe some offices will even cease to exist because now we know this is possible. So I just love that there are lots of silver linings. Yes, this is a scary situation. It's super uncertain. We don't know exactly where it's going, but I encourage everybody to see the many silver linings the many gifts that are in this, because we have that opportunity to radically change the way we live and work.
And for all organizations that are listening, don't make this something where this is over and it goes back to business as usual. This is an opportunity to start to make those shifts. And guess what? It's about baby steps. I'm not saying tomorrow you're going to do everything all at once, but slowly start implementing these different things. And, one other thing I like to ask you, Shelley, about, because you do support a lot of leaders. I do as well, from an executive coaching perspective. And where I think there's a disconnect as well when it comes to leadership development is there's not enough support available for leaders in a lot of organizations. I think Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies are doing it well. Some, I'm not going to generalize,
Yeah.
but there's a lot who are not investing in their leaders in that way. And I truly believe not even executive, emerging leaders, but having support available for all leaders is critical. So what's your experience been there, Shelley? Like, what do you notice in terms of the differences between the companies who get it and support their leaders and the ones that don't?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, to be honest, I really only work with the ones who get it because I feel like it's pushing the ball uphill, right? Trying to push water uphill with the ones who don't get it. And I haven't been there yet but I would eventually like to go in and help leaders who are like, okay, I see a glimmer of possibility and maybe this moment in time will help. Um, I think I think it's a shame, right? I'm going to flip the question a little bit and
Yeah.
say this. I think we all, as leaders, need to get really, really clear on our values.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that those values align with the companies that we work with.
Yes.
And if a value you hold as a leader is one that prioritizes personal and professional development, then make sure you are working for an organization that supports that and leaders who model and support that. I think this is what I see. People get so frustrated, and this is another ingredient of burnout, right? Because you're in I see people like emerging leaders in places that aren't offering that support. And so they're just people are modeling what they see, and they're spinning and spinning and spinning without that support, without that, even understanding of how to go inward or how to be a wholehearted and courageous leader.
Yes.
So I want to say, because the more of us who say, you know what, no more, I'm not going to work for a company or a culture that doesn't align with that value, the more we're going to force it to happen. It's, again, another piece of the
Yes.
culture shift.
Absolutely, because if talent's demanding, which a lot has supported to millennials and Gen Z and next generations, where they're saying, guess what? I'm not bought into this anymore. I'm not sacrificing my life to be at work 24/7. I do want to live my purpose. I do want to be somewhere where my values get to be lived and breathed. And if you're not honoring that, that's not where I want to do my work. So I 100% agree with what you're saying. If we can have more people demanding that we want to work in organizations that are going to be heart-centered and who are going to be creating that space for courageous leadership. And I have definitely seen a shift in the last 10 years where there was a time where I couldn't even say heart-based leadership. It would be like, why are we talking about the heart? Or I would say love at work, and love, not like romantic love, like love in terms of human connection. And now I can say that and people don't get freaked
Yes.
out. So
Well,
I
and
think some
soul is
shifts are
another one
happening.
of those words, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, even some places, even the media is sometimes funny. Like, there's like, can you say CEO of your life? And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, you can say that, but I'm choosing not to say that, because
Yes.
I think saying chief soul officer is like, gets the deeper essence of who we are as humans. And that's what we need more of. That's what we need more of. We're starting to see more of that in our leadership, especially now in the midst of this pandemic. I mean, I feel like we've seen more heart-led and soul-centered leadership than ever before. And it's beautiful. And I just like, every day I'm like, please, 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 can this just continue? I want to see the
Yes.
trajectory, just because it's really beautiful. And we're going to, like, the world is going to be a happier, more fulfilling place to be. Like, that's the world I want to live in. More of it
Absolutely.
coming from that place.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my mission's really been to raise consciousness globally. And I think we have an opportunity to really raise that consciousness in workplaces. Shelley, I knew this was going to be the case, that I wasn't going to want to get off this conversation because I was going to love it so much, but we're going to end. But Shelley and I were talking before, there will be a part 2 at some point. But go in the show notes, you'll have all the information around Shelley's book, and you can check her out on her website, all of that kind of stuff. But Shelley, final thought you'd like to leave with our audience.
So here's, this just came to me. So here's a provocative thought for any leaders who are listening to this and who want to take steps in this area. I believe my next book is going to be The Soul of Business. And I really want to dig deep into this. So any progressive leaders who are listening, who want to have this conversation, who might even be willing to do this together, so we create case studies that are the foundation of this next book, and we create these cultures that we're talking about, that lights me on fire. So reach out to me. I would love to have the conversation.
Yes, take the invitation. Anyone who's listening, take the invitation.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much, Shelley, for sharing your soul, your spirit, your authentic self with all of us today.
Thank you. It's been an honor. It's been awesome. I can't wait for part 2.
Me too. Have a great day, everyone.